Hello, hello, and welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I am your host, Megan, and my amazing co-host is...
Hey, I'm Amanda.
Hello. We are
Hey.
your source for messy, imperfect homeschool advice and community. We are veteran homeschool moms, and we've got a solid groove going when it comes to educating our respective offspring. But we'll never sell you a perfect image here. We have oodles of good days. We love homeschooling, truly. But we have rough days too. And if you're following an influencer on social media who is only showing you the dazzling, shiny side of homeschooling, they're a big fat liar.
Right? I mean, look, we would rather you come here and know that number one, like this is what you're getting into. If you're new, we want you to have accurate expectations of the Megan and Amanda show. And two, we don't want you to feel alone. We don't want you to feel like you're the only one who has rough days or feels freaking exhausted sometimes. But thankfully, we do have way more good days than rough days on average. There are definitely rough seasons. And if you're experiencing the opposite, like we want to help. We have hundreds of podcast episodes you can go back and give a listen to, but we also have live meetings, online courses, one-on-one or two-on-one coaching sessions where we can dig in and just like help you recalibrate. So homeschooling is the positive experience that you envisioned.
Yeah, I still can't keep a straight face when you say 2-on-1 because it's just, I can't.
I'm just going to put this out there. This week, actually, no, a week or two ago, I did kind of like a big social media push for us that was like, hey, our first published book is out there. You should go check it out. And like, my name is on this book. And I was like, I feel like this might be the only time I ever get to yell that from the rooftops, because while I am writing in my own free time and it will only be under my name, it'll be werewolf smut. And I don't envision a world where I just blast that all over the internet. Like, hey, come read my book. So yeah, I understand. 2-on-1. I understand it well.
I know. And that's not my genre. I totally think it's because I hang out with you so much that I'm like 2-on-1. You've corrupted me.
Clearly, we're very conservative, prudish.
Yeah. I did see an Instagram reel. I should have sent it to you. Did I send it to you? The one where the lady had written a book and her son was so proud that he was like telling everybody that his mom was a published author, but she was writing, it was queer something smut. I forget, there was some other thing that made her particular brand of smut different. And she must live in the South because she was impersonating all these moms who were coming up to her like in the carpool line being like, what'd you write? And she was like, well, now, so yeah, there you go. But as it relates to homeschooling, if you feel like a salmon swimming upstream, it almost certainly isn't a sign that you should quit homeschooling. It's just a sign that you need to phone a friend, make some changes, build a stronger community around you for support and ideas and stuff like that. The homeschool world can be difficult to navigate, especially if you're secular and you believe in off-the-wall things like equality, empathy, human rights, which of course leads to other wild and crazy ideas like women's rights and trans rights and marriage equality and support of Black Lives Matter and things like that. And in the homeschool world, good luck.
Right? I mean, in many homeschool communities, at best, you're going to get a side eye for those beliefs. And more often than not, you're just going to be straight up shunned, right? Like, oh, I think my invite got lost. Suddenly I'm blocked from that Facebook group. They did not appreciate my discussion of werewolf smut. How dare they? So, look, if you are struggling to find your people, we are happy to be them. We personally, both of us, would love to be your people, but we also have this amazing community that is progressive and secular and like-minded and kind and inclusive, just so supportive. I don't know why it is so hard to find supportive right now, but God, it is hard. And I mean, when you find it, you like hold on with both hands and a foot or something. Just don't let that go.
Exactly. Right. Oh, goodness. Well, today we're going to be talking about how to know if your kids are actually learning. Should we be testing them? Are we grading them? Without finite measurements like those, are we confident? Can we ever feel confident that they're progressing and that we can kind of sort of take a breath and think, I might not be completely fucking this whole thing up? It's going to be a really solid discussion. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be good. But we start all of our episodes with a weekly recap of just kind of what's going on in the homeschooling world and beyond of Meagan and Amanda. It's kind of part of our keeping it real anti-influencer vibes around here. So how's your week been, Amanda?
Yeah, as far as homeschooling goes, we're doing well. And I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of surprised by that because we've had so much like up and down and stops and starts and trips and this and that. But it's going better than I expected December to be going, given what our schedule actually looks like. So I'm happy about that. I feel like I should probably knock on wood. If I had any real wood anywhere close to me, I would. I record in my bathroom, so there's no real wood in here. And yeah, like personally, yeah. Last week I said that I felt like not that I was hanging on by my fingernails, but more that like I was being like tossed around like a floaty in whitewater rapids. And I still feel that way. I have a big holiday winter social that happens this week. And I just need that to happen. And once we get that done and put away, we start like our longer kind of winter break. And for us, that's this year, I think I've scheduled like 2.5 weeks as kind of like a winter break. My folks are coming in for part of that. We're going to do some fun stuff. We're all going to stay at a hotel that really goes all out for decorations and things like that. And hopefully, you know, completely random, but the kiddo has been rewatching Big Bang Theory. And there's an episode where Sheldon orders from the Cheesecake Factory using Dungeons and Dragons dice by just rolling and eating whatever numbers come up. And so the kiddo has asked if we can all go out to eat at the Cheesecake Factory together. There's one with nice outdoor dining and the heaters and stuff. So we have that on the plan for celebrating the start of winter break. And yeah, so we're going to hang on to the fun random things at this point and just we're getting there. We're going to make it. Yeah.
That does sound like fun. I like it. Although I feel like it would be much safer to do the dice rolling thing at an all you can eat sushi place. So at least you know your price is finite.
That's true. Although, I mean, the thing is like the last time we went to Cheesecake Factory, because at our mall, it's one of the few places that's like an actual sit down restaurant that has really nice outdoor seating. And the last time we went, I was like, man, these portions are huge. And nothing is really that expensive. Like the independent restaurants, you know, the little mom and pop places and stuff, they have gotten so expensive because ingredients are so expensive and rent is so expensive. And as much as we absolutely need our $20 an hour minimum wage and those kinds of things, like it means the prices are just really high. And I guess because it's a big chain, right? They're able to keep their prices down. But I was like, man, this is way cheaper. Like, get as much as you want. Go ham. So, yeah, anyway, that's what we've got going on. We're just in it to survive. Some people are in it to win it. We're just in it to make it until January. How about you? What do you got going on?
Oh, I'm telling you. I mean, to your point about just kind of like rolling with the quirky fun, we were laughing tonight. So I've talked in our Patreon meetings about the fact that my oldest kiddo especially orders from this app Too Good To Go, which I know you've got where you are too, Amanda. I don't know if it's just in cities or what, but it's restaurants can go on there and put whatever they're going to have left over at the end of the day. And it's a mystery. You don't know what you're going to get. So you know what's on their menu and it's going to be some sort of hodgepodge of whatever they prepared too much of that's on their menu. And so he'll go on. I mean, it's ridiculous. He'll order €4, €5 and come back with this huge thing with a steak and a salad and this and that. And €5 is like, well, it gets worse every day, thanks to Trump. But it depends on when you're listening to this, right? It might be about 60 or it might be about $6. But it does get worse by the day. But you have to go pick it up at the end of the day. It's when they close. So it'll be like 10 o'clock. He'll have to go out and pick up his sushi box.
I will just say that in the US, not everything is a nighttime pickup. So if that is
Yeah, yeah.
problematic for you, it's worth checking. A lot of our restaurants will have like an 11 a.m. pickup, a 1 p.m. pickup, a like 4:30 pickup kind of before they start. It just depends on, like if they have different lunch things or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway.
That's true. It is that way here as well. There are daytime things, but because it's Europe, all the daytime stuff tends to be pastries. So it's just 100 variations of bread. And my kid is like, I want steak or sushi or something. So that's evening, at least here.
Mhm.
But yeah, good point. Yeah. So he convinced my youngest son to go with him to pick it up and told him it's right near the metro station, which like you pass the metro station to go there, but it's a few significant blocks past the metro station. So he convinces him to go, drags him further than he anticipated. And then on the way back, it was pouring and they brought the dog. So they get back. They're like drowned rats. The dog is soaked. And so we were all just kind of like cracking up because we were like, oh my goodness, that did not go as planned. But he was sitting there happy as clam eating his sushi. So he was good.
We have this family joke that I will never, it's at my expense and it will never stop being told. I'm certain of it. But I was the first person in my family to ever move away from home and move to a city. And when my family came to visit me, one day I was like, hey, let's go on this little adventure. It's only 6 blocks away. And in my defense, it was 6 blocks away, but it was 6 city blocks.
Yeah.
And sometimes city blocks are really big. And so they're like, I'm from a very small town. 6 blocks in a very small town is a very different story, like the whole situation. And so, yeah, to this day, my family will be like, oh, how far away is that? Is it like 15, 20 minutes? Like, was that like 6 blocks?
Yeah, I think the next time before Liam agrees to go pick up Too Good to Go, he'll be like, I need to see it on the GPS and understand where I'm walking to. Lisbon is a city of hills. So, you turn a corner and it's like a steep incline all the way up. He's like, great, at 10 o'clock at night. But yeah. Yeah, so that's that. I mean, so it was kind of funny tonight. Last night, my oldest kiddo and I were planning some travel for him. He's going to Canada to play Pokemon and visit some friends from summer camp, which he's excited about. So he's excited about that. And then my boys are going to go to Birmingham in England and play Pokemon there, which within Europe, you can fly so inexpensively. I was laughing because my youngest son's ticket home from Birmingham to Lisbon was 11 pounds, which I didn't do the math. The pound is not as strong against the dollar. It's probably like $16 maybe or something like that. I'm like, you can't get an Uber in some places for $16. And he's flying from England to Portugal for $16. So granted, it's one of these, like, you get the seat you get, no frills. He'll be like wearing half his clothing because he can only bring a backpack that has to fit in a little tiny cubby. But like, hey, 11 pounds, off he goes. So they'll be good. But yeah, so we got some like logistics done for them as far as like adventures they're looking forward to having and whatnot. So that was good. It was a big thing off my to-do list. So that felt nice. But possibly the most exciting thing in my week is there's a store here in the city called the Liberty Store, which is as American as it sounds. There's a Budweiser display in the front window. And I've never been, but my mom was looking for seasoned breadcrumbs and I was going to be near it the other day. So I said, oh, well, I'll go and see if I can find you some seasoned breadcrumbs. There really wasn't much else that I was looking for and I didn't really buy much else. But they had funfetti cake mix, which I was like, say what? And so I right now am on such a funfetti high. I ate so much that I actually kind of feel gross about it. And I might pass out before the end of this episode, but I'm also not sad about it. It was a nice little like American treat, which was kind of fun. So yeah, it was pretty tasty. I mean, I teach baking online, which we don't really talk about it that much, but at any given point in time, I have a couple of dozen students that are working through self-paced courses and they send me their cakes. And every time I see a funfetti cake, I'm like, oh, that looks really good. That over the top sprinkle heaven. And so, yeah, I had funfetti today and it was everything I hoped it would be. So it was nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
We do a lot of our grocery shopping at grocery outlet, bargain market. If you're familiar with it, you get really random stuff. So you cannot go with a grocery list of like, this is the only store I'm going to, and these are the meals I'm going to make, and this is the stuff that I need. However, they often have amazing deals on brownie mix. And so we picked up some brownie mix. So last night we made brownies and then we had strawberry ice cream. So we took the brownies out while they were still warm and then put strawberry ice cream on top. And I was also not sad about it.
Good stuff, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, you got to find joy in life anywhere you possibly can, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
All right. So let's talk measuring learning, shall we? Let's do it.
Yeah.
How are we measuring? Okay. And this is going to be one of those times where you're going to see the difference between me and Amanda. Loosey-goosey unschooler here. Amanda, aggressive academic homeschooler. So we will be most likely quite different here, but we might surprise you on some similarities here as well. We'll see. So how are we reassuring ourselves on both of our various journeys and hopefully on your journey that this is going okay? How do we know that our kids are where they quote unquote need to be, et cetera, et cetera? So let's dig in. So let's start with a brief positioning on testing and kind of where we are, just level set the playing field here. I'm a firm no on testing unless it's child-led or required by law. So when we lived in North Carolina, we did testing because it's required by law. My child is registered to take AP statistics in May because he would like to, and he's been preparing for it all year. So yeah, we will test either because we need to or because my kids want to, but we don't test for any other reasons.
Yeah. So for us, it's definitely different. We've talked before on the show that right now, we live in California and we are part of the independent study / homeschool charter kind of program. And that does require quite a bit of testing. So I do see some value in it. I'm going to be honest. It's a really easy way for me to see that my kiddo is learning and progressing because he tests well. And so he tests well. I know that he's doing well each year. It's like easy. I don't have to worry beyond that. And when we were first starting out with homeschooling, I may have been more interested in seeking out this kind of regular-ish standardized testing. Probably not the 3 to 4 times a year that the California homeschool charter system requires, because I think that that's excessive, but
It's a lot.
it is. It's a lot of standardized testing. So if your kiddo doesn't test well or has really bad test anxiety or things like that, it's not the system for you. That said, I have found it useful. And so I may have still, when he was younger, still looked at doing something like once a year if we weren't in this specific system. Maybe once every other year, because that still tells you that you're progressing and moving forward. Now, with where we are, I do feel pretty confident in what we've got going on. So at this point, if we were to leave the charter school system, which in the foreseeable future, we probably will be filing our PSA for anyone who's listening and knows what that means. I wouldn't do as much standardized testing, for sure, not 3 or 4 times a year. And what I did do would be more geared towards helping my kiddo feel comfortable with college admissions type standardized testing. We'd be looking towards maybe more like practice tests and things like that, so that there wasn't the anxiety around and like a general comfort level with ACT, SAT type things. So I think as we talk through this episode about like testing and grading and all of that stuff, it is important to remember that our goal here, typically, generally speaking, is not to recreate school at home. And if you're leaning towards needing to do that, or you feel like there's a reason that you need to do that outside of state standards, you probably need to do some deschooling. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the episode.
Yeah. So I think another thing to talk about too is why we feel the pressure to test in the first place. Why is this such a common conversation among homeschoolers? And I don't think it's surprising because we've been super duper culturally conditioned to take tests, to administer tests, that tests are the proof of learning, that grades show your worth as a student, that data is the one kind of rock solid, which it's not, legitimate way to prove learning. So I think it's natural that people have difficulty letting go of testing or grading things or feel that they should be doing it more or whatever you're feeling. I think it's very, very natural given the way most of us probably grew up and our education that we experienced. There's this continuous fear of your child falling behind. And we did a whole episode not that long ago about what is behind, what does that mean? If you're consistently in your own head thinking, what if they fall behind or are they behind? Go listen to that episode. But I mean, behind, spoiler alert for the episode, behind is usually defined by systems that don't know your kid anywhere close to the way that you know your kid. And they're trying to assess a gazillion kids. And there has to be some way to assess a gazillion kids. There has to be, they can't treat them all as individuals. They can't, there's too many of them, but you can because you're homeschooling. So it's an entirely different system. And then, of course, there's the family pressure that comes through. You know, how do you know they're learning? Gosh, we're recording this at the holiday season. So it's, you know, US Thanksgiving. If you observe Thanksgiving, family gatherings, Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Yule, whatever you're observing, you end up together with people who maybe aren't necessarily homeschooling, don't understand homeschooling, don't necessarily support homeschooling. And you're going to get a lot of like, but how do you know they're learning? And they're trying to quiz your kids and asking them what 2 times 3 is. And it's like, so it's not surprising that we end up having these thoughts.
Yeah, I just the other night, actually, I was talking with my husband and he was like, well, if you aren't giving him real tests, like how is he going to be able to do real tests in college when he goes off to college? And I was like, well, he's smart enough. He can take a test. And he was like, yeah, but like, shouldn't he be practicing so he's a good test taker when it really matters in college? And I said, do you think you're a good test taker? And he's like, oh no, I'm a terrible test taker. That's why I want him to be able to like practice and get good at it. And I was like, how many years did you go to school? And like, how many years did you have to take tests? And he was like, well, I mean, I took tests all 13 years of regular school and then 5 years of college. And I was like, that's a lot of years to be practicing and you're still a shit test taker. So I don't know.
You can tell him that my unschooler, who had never really taken a test, I mean, he went to public school through the end of 8th grade, so he took a weekly spelling test, but that was about it. And he's hyperlexic, so that wasn't really that wasn't really a challenge. Went to college and was taking engineering courses and taking tests and doing well on them, having never really tested at all or even formally studied at all, and was on the dean's list. So let him know he'll be fine.
I mean, that's it. I do think that there's like an illusion, right? That tests give a full picture of a child's abilities. But the reality is we have all at some point, maybe many times, crammed for a test and then like this information, you know, like maybe it was there in our short-term memory, but it definitely didn't convert to long-term memories. Or it asks these really specific multiple choice questions that kids are able to kind of game and do well with. Or on the flip side, like kids sees this paper laid out in front of them and they just freeze up and then they do really poorly when you know for a fact that if you had said, hey, tell me about this book that you read, and they would know all of the things, but that paper on the table in front of them just made everything fly out of their brain. A test does not necessarily tell you what you want it to. That said, I will be honest, a test on the surface feels like a very quick, easy way to see if your child knows something, as long as they test well. If they don't test well, then they feel bad about themselves and you question whether or not it's working. And you just have an uphill battle over something that you didn't even really need to be dealing with right then at that point anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So what can testing offer if you choose to use testing? We're going to talk about the pros and cons and what that might look like. But what can testing actually offer for you? It does offer a snapshot that can reveal gaps or strengths at a specific time. It's not always going to do that. There are definitely types of testing and assessment tools that can help you be like, oh, huh, look at that. I forgot to cover punctuation with my kid. They missed every question on proper punctuation. We should go back and do that. And that's fine if you find something like that, if you've got some kind of thing like that, but it doesn't have to be a like, well, they didn't get a perfect score, so they've messed up, or they don't know their math because they only got an 80%. I guarantee you, you've made math mistakes when you were quickly adding something up and been like, oh, that is not what I thought that receipt was going to be. Like, how did it get to that? And then you're like, oh, actually, yeah, guess that does make sense. Your kiddos are the same. Testing can be helpful for kids who like structure or who thrive on benchmarks. Again, make sure that you're using it because it really matches their personality and helps with their learning, not because they were in public school and they have this innate sense of self-worth tied to a test. If you've got that going on, then you both need to be doing some deschooling and really looking at that and dealing with that. But there are some kids who really thrive on tests.
Yeah, I have one of those, which is so random if you look at the way we've schooled. And also, to an extent, kind of sort of, if you look at the kid. So it's my daughter. She's as artsy as they come. I mean, she's got purple hair and wears Doc Martens and has an art studio. She's just a completely quirky cat. So that side of her doesn't necessarily lean into what you would think would want good testing and good scores. But then if you ever play Monopoly with her and she laser death rays you out of her eyeballs over Park Place or something, you'd be like, oh, I get it now. When she was in university program, they had a Google Drive for scores and stuff like that. And I mean, she'd be like hammering that Google Drive looking for her score. And if it didn't come through at the time frame, that she'd be like, where is my score? She wanted to know that number. She already freaking knew she did well. She graduated like with highest honors, but like she wanted that number. And it was funny because at one point we looked into Prisma Learning for her, which is in the US. It's like a project-based online homeschool type deal, because she was looking for kind of community and stuff like that. It was less about the education and more about the schedule and the community and stuff that she was after. And they have a thing where you get to grade your own work and say what you feel you deserve. And she was like, what the hell is that? She was like, I want a number and I want it from someone else and I want it to be good. She was like, that's the wackiest bullshit I've ever heard. And where other kids would really thrive on that and that ability to self-assess and stuff like that. She was like, she wanted that validation. So yeah, there are kids out there that enjoy that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have a kiddo who really thrives on positive assessment from someone else, from an external source. And even we try to not focus on external validation and stuff like that, but it is how some kids are wired, no matter how much deschooling you try to do. And I've never written a grade on anything, but still he's like, oh, what did the teacher say about my work? Like, oh, okay. Like, I'm not the teacher. So what did she say? Some random person that sees you once a month. I will say testing is required in some states, in some specific programs, like the charter school program we're in. And if you have that, it is good to normalize compliance. There are times you will have to comply and do things that you don't really want to do, but it's also important to not center it. I said at the top of the episode, we have to test like actual boring, tedious, standardized testing 3 times a year. And our charter just added in another very small, but another test every month. He has to do a set of standardized questions. Do I love it? No. Does it take much time? Also, no. So in our home, it's really a lot like it's fine. Just do it. Do your best. That's all that matters. Do the best that you feel like you can do right now. I even try to avoid saying do your best, because if you have a bad day, then you know that you didn't do your best and then you feel bad. Do the best that you feel like you can do right now with everything that's going on. I don't care. It doesn't matter. We're going to do it. And that's the end of it. I'm not sure he's seen his standardized test scores in years. Maybe in the very early days of homeschooling, I would have shared like, hey, you did a great job. Look at this. And now I'm just like, truly, you're doing awesome. good job on getting it done, doesn't matter. I still
Moving
get the
on.
reports. Yeah, I still get the reports. I save them in the file in case we ever need them for some reason, but it does nothing for him. And and that's it. Data is a tool. It can help direct what you do as the homeschool parent or caregiver. It can give you pieces of information, but it's not the whole story. The information you get from any type of testing will never be the whole story.
Hmm. Yeah. So, to your point, testing can offer some value and some enhancement, if you will, potentially. There could be some downsides to testing as well. A lot of tests, to your point, measure test taking skills more than the actual learning. Like you could know that stuff inside and out, but you could freeze when you get the test. You could be having a bad day. If you're my kid, the light in the room is making a buzzing noise and now you've lost all ability to think. There's so many different things that can go on. If you have a kiddo who gets anxiety or performance pressure around testing, worries about kind of comparison traps of how other kids are doing on the test. I definitely have, when it comes to writing, for example, not so much testing, but when it comes to writing, a white sheet of paper paralysis child, where it's like, how on earth am I ever going to fill this piece of paper? And all thinking goes out the window because the spiral begins and it's all over. Not all testing might be set up as neurodivergent friendly. I talked about it recently. I was so pleased when I set my kiddo up for his AP test. They were like, what accommodations does he need? And I sent a decent list over thinking like, well, I'll aim for this and I'll see what happens. And they replied back with like, no problem. We can accommodate that. I was like, boom, life is good. But there might be stuff you're not even aware of that's tripping your kid up with the testing process because they might not be aware of it or they might not know how to verbalize it, especially if they're younger. And so that could be really challenging in getting accurate data or having an experience that's not harmful to your child or traumatic for your child as well. A lot of times testing focuses on deficits rather than strengths. I mean, even if you just look at a traditional test and the way that it's graded, most of the time you're not getting like smiley faces for all the things you got right. You're getting X's on the stuff you got wrong. It's focusing on the stuff you got wrong when you get that paper back and you're counting those red X's. I know I would do the math when I was in school, like how many questions I could get wrong because you know how much they're worth because of how many questions there are. And you get it back and you're counting, you're like, I could get 6 wrong. And you're counting those X's, that moment of like panic when you get it back. And then from our perspective, I mean, we're unschoolers, so we're super big on learning as a gift and cherishing curiosity and all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes when you're learning for the sake of a test rather than learning for the joy of learning, it can damage that curiosity drive. And we know from endless amounts of research and studies that our kids are born so curious and that through many traditional systems, they lose a lot of that curiosity. And so I'm all about protecting that curiosity as much as I possibly can.
Well, it's that kind of thing. Even as the grown up in the equation, if there's a hobby that you're interested in learning, you're probably going to learn it and be able to set it aside and come back to it years later and be able to pick it up again. Whereas if something goes wrong with your kitchen sink and you have to go to the University of YouTube and figure out how to fix it, and you muddle through fixing your kitchen sink, and then you're like, thank God that's done. And then years later, it happens again. You're not like, oh, I could just fix it this way. You're like, I think it was, what website was it that I found that great video on how to fix this? Like, you don't remember that because you didn't want to learn it and remember it. You needed to fix a problem.
Yeah.
Same thing. Okay, so how do you know that they're learning without testing? I'm going to say big picture, with time, you are going to be able to just know. You're going to have conversations with your kids where you're going to be like, I didn't even know that. Or my 9-year-old knows that. And I only learned it when I relearned history with them. We're like, where did they learn that fact? Because I didn't teach them that. Was that in one of the books that I got them from the library? With time, it will be very clear that your kids are learning an amazing amount of stuff.
I feel like in the unschooling world, it's challenging sometimes to give people advice because I feel like a lot of times the advice is like, trust the process, it'll be great. So I feel like you just had one of those moments where it was like, you'll just know. That felt very trust the process to me. But from the academic aggressive side, I'm like, yes, it's there.
Well, I mean, it is. It's that thing. I think I would never just trust the process. I'm not an unschooler. But I will tell you that with time, you will have these moments where you are completely reassured of like, oh yeah, this is totally working. That's amazing. All right. Now, realistically, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably want some specifics because you're not like, oh, that's okay. I'll just wait 3 years for them to spit out some amazing fact. And I'm like, wow, look at that. I didn't learn that when I was in public school. So some things that homeschool parents might see kind of every day or in more general terms that are kind of those daily learning indicators. Skill stacking. Your kiddo suddenly uses a concept from a lesson weeks ago in a totally new way. They're able to do the critical thinking that is required to be like, oh, I learned this thing and I'm pretty sure I can apply it to this new thing. Awesome. I don't know a single homeschool parent that's like, I'm homeschooling, but I really don't want my kiddos to learn critical thinking and how to apply skills from one thing to the next. That's what we're all looking for. Improved endurance. Suddenly they can spend more time on tasks or projects without melting down. This is going to be one of those things that it's going to be slow and steady progress, and you're probably not going to notice it. Kind of like when you don't realize that your kid has grown, but then the grandparents come over and they're like, oh my gosh, they grew 3 inches. And you're like, oh, yeah, he did. Look at that. It'll be slow and steady progress. But then all of a sudden you're going to notice like, wow, they were here and now they are here. Like, that's amazing. Independence. I think most homeschool parents are like, really? Independence? When is that going to kick in? But it looks a lot of different ways, right? It might be that they start initiating work on their own. It could be that they start planning the steps or figuring out how to plan the steps that they need. Or even just something as simple as asking better questions. Suddenly, instead of being questions that you're like, I'm going to put on a nice face and be like, oh, that's a good question. When inside you're like, oh my God, could it be a more basic question? Are you kidding me? And suddenly the questions are like, oh, that's actually a really good question. You know, I don't know the answer to that. Let's go look it up together. Or, wow, that's a great question. I'm going to need a minute to think about how to answer that correctly. Well done, kiddo. And that's going to happen a lot earlier than you think. This is not going to only happen when they're 16. It's going to happen when they're 7. And you're going to be like, oh man alive. I thought I was more prepared, but I'm not.
Yeah, I've definitely had those moments too where you're like, right? Another big one for me was and has been language growth, especially with my youngest, because I've talked about the fact that he, from a super duper young age, just needed extreme amounts of input and stimulation. And so we tossed that kid audiobooks really, really young. Like really young, because he just constantly wanted to be read to. And I'm like, love you, love reading to you. But I had 2 other kids that were also really small and I worked full time. And so, yeah. And I mean, to this day, he comes out with words that were just like, I can't believe it. I have a group text with my mom and my husband, and I'll be like, Liam used XYZ word today, fully incorrect context. You know, I mean, he was like 9 when he started busting out with like obsequious and stuff. And I'm like, huh? But it was all coming from stuff in his world around him. It wasn't stuff that I was teaching him. So yeah, they start asking more nuanced questions, deeper questions. They start connecting dots. They start using vocabulary words that you're like, what? And so it happens. Keep an eye on it, celebrate it. It happens. Real world application, you'll see them doing math in real world situations. I can't remember if we talked about it on the podcast or if it was in a Patreon meeting or something, but when my oldest got his license, he and my daughter would start going to the supermarket. He would drive, she would do the shopping. And she came home one day with the world's smallest box of Cheerios because she had done the math per ounce and was like, this was the cheapest one. And I'm sitting there celebrating the fact that she took the time to do the math and did it correctly. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, and it's got like a bowl of cereal in it, you know, like, but Great job, right?
Yep.
But they'll come up with geography during trip planning. They'll come up with scientific observations about the weather or about stuff related to stuff
Motion.
related. What's that?
We just, oh, motion, science and motion. We just had
Mm.
that the other day. We were walking through one of those like wooden kind of structures that they build in cities along major traffic where there's construction on one side and
Oh,
they have
yeah.
like
Mhm.
a walkway path to go. And the kiddo was like, do you think that that is going to stop a car from crushing you in any way, shape, or form? And I was like, well, if the question is, will it stop it from crushing me? The answer is no. It's very poorly constructed. It's not going to stop it from crushing me. But will it slow it down? And he was like, no. And I was like, well, let's think about that. Like, we've just been working on a whole unit of physics and the various Newton's laws. And he was like, well, it is going to cause a force. So, I mean, it is going to like slow it down, but there's only like 6 inches between it and us. So it's not going to have time to slow it down enough. Yeah, I mean,
Enough.
like, yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
these are examples of real world. Will a car crush us here? Like, well, what did your science say today?
Exactly. Might not give you much reassurance, but yeah, let's talk about it. I know. Yeah. I mean, you'll see confidence shifts in your kids. They'll advocate for things that they need. They'll ask for help when they need it. They'll try things that maybe they wouldn't try before. And now all of a sudden they're testing the waters and kind of dipping their toe in. And I can do this. And you're like, this is new. And you're just kind of quietly sitting there watching and celebrating. Those moments are awesome.
Yeah, no, totally. And this is another one of those things that you won't see when it's happening, but it can be, we've talked about it before in other podcasts. It can be really helpful to just take a picture or keep the occasional project because you will see in their art, in their writing, in all kinds of things that they do, that there's going to be growth. Things are going to become more complex. They're going to become more intentional. You're going to see that problem solving and in-depth thinking come through. And it's really most prevalent when you can look at a project from last year and a project from this year. You didn't notice the slow kind of day-to-day improvement, but over a year, their project is going to be more impressive. And that shows you, yeah, they're growing and they're learning on the daily.
Mhm.
Again, problem solving, we've kind of touched on this with a bunch of the other examples, but fewer I can't do this moments and more I think I can figure out a way to make this work or to make this happen. Reading progress, this is one of those classic, we all worry about it, but almost every kid eventually becomes a reader. It will happen. It does happen. There'll be smoother decoding, better comprehension questions, or maybe it's just more enthusiasm for books. Don't forget, we've talked about it before, but audiobooks are real books. Graphic novels are real books. Whatever enthusiasm looks like for them, it's still reading progress. A desire and interest to get lost in a world that is one of imagination and words is amazing, whatever that looks like. Don't downplay it. And then a big one that we want to focus on and really work on, but we often think like, oh, well, it doesn't really count for school, even though it totally does, is emotional regulation.
Mhm.
Learning to pause, learning to regroup, learning to take a step back and restart. It is so important. It is social emotional learning, SEL. Schools are doing it. They are trying to find ways to implement it in their regular curriculum. They are working on it so much. It is happening in your own home. Notice it, recognize it, give it credit.
Yeah. We just had that not that long ago. And it was interesting because my husband was actually the one that noticed it, which is pretty interesting because he works in another country. He doesn't see the kids on the day to day. And even when we are together, he's a workaholic. So it's not his world to be noticing things like that usually. And he was asking how something went with one of the kids. And I told him, and I said, so he's okay. Like he's a little bummed, but he's okay. And my husband was like, yeah, but before he would have fallen apart over something like that. And I was like, oh yeah, he would have. Like I didn't notice it in that case and he did. And I was like, you're so right. So yeah, it's nice to kind of have more sets of eyes that are supportive that can pick up on things that you might miss sometimes too, which
Yeah,
is
that's it.
nice.
As the caregiver in the trenches, all of these things are day-to-day examples, but they can be easy to overlook if you're not really taking a step back and
Mm-hmm.
purposely paying attention.
Yeah, it's so true. All right. So we talked about testing, which kind of ties into grading, which in some ways ties into grading because most tests get graded, but other things get graded too. Could be a paragraph or 5-paragraph essay or whatever, a particular project or a presentation. Any of these things can also be graded. So let's talk about kind of when grading makes sense, when it doesn't make sense, all that good stuff. So grading makes sense if it's required for a transcript, which it will be, right? So 99% of the time, you're going to need a GPA on a transcript, and a GPA comes from grade point. It's in the name. It's right there. Now, I have gotten roped into conversations with people who are trying to figure out unschooling, and they're like, well, they'll never have a diploma because they'll have never taken a test, and then I'll never be able to make a transcript. So what do I do? My 2 unschoolers who have graduated totally have transcripts. How did I grade them? It goes back to the enthusiasm piece before that Amanda was talking about and the depth of focus. So that's how I graded. Where with my oldest, for example, I don't remember, to be very, very honest, every elective that's on his transcript right now because I kind of bundled things together. He had so many electives that I finally stopped putting them on his transcript because he's into 1,000,001 different things. He's a multi-potentialite. He's an ADHDer. So he's got 100 different things that he's working on at all times. But for example, 3D printing's on there in some capacity. And oh my gosh, it's an easy A. I mean, he spent hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of hours. He 3D printed himself his own 3D printer using another 3D printer. Like, come on, right? That's an A. Like, I don't need to test that. That's just ridiculously simple. He'd say to me, I've got an Amazon cart going. Can you push it through? And I'd go in and look at it. I didn't even know what any of the stuff in the cart did. I mean, there's ball bearings in there and there's this and there's that. And I'm like, what the heck are you doing? But he knows what he's doing. So that's an A.
But I think to your point too, is that in a traditional public school, there are plenty of times where you have a final project that is 50 or 60% of your
Yeah.
grade. And that would be a final project. Just because you didn't assign it and you didn't say this is going to be 50% of your grade, he did an amazing, huge project. And you're like, okay, so this is easy to quantify. I mean,
Yeah.
you
That's
can
it.
do the same with oral presentations and all kinds, even in a regular brick and mortar school. There are so many ways for teachers to assess things. I know I had, like in my Spanish class, it was always a written test. But when I took French, we would often have to go out into the hallway one-on-one and do an oral test to prove that we could do the stuff. It didn't have to just be written. And so if your kiddo is info dumping on you or you're standing by while they have a conversation in Spanish at the Mexican restaurant, look at that.
Check.
They did,
Yeah.
they did their oral Spanish. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
done and done.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, on the flip side, when you're talking about unschooling and not grading things, but then assigning grades for transcripts and things like that. Like one example from my oldest kiddo was at one point he took an outschool class for ages and ages on how to publish your own book. And he was really into photography, specifically astrophotography and nature photography. And that went on for years. I mean, the number of lenses the child accumulated was ridiculous because our local photography store would have contests and he would enter every single one of them and win most of them, which then gave him credits to buy more equipment and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, at the time we were living in Texas and he was thinking, well, maybe I'll publish like a coffee table book of wildflowers because that's a really big thing in Texas. And so he took the class, he took the photos. He didn't love it. He was like, this is kind of boring. It's not really my jam. I don't find this fun. I don't find it inspiring. So he didn't make the book. Did he learn how to make a book? Yeah. Did he explore hundreds of varieties of wildflowers? Yeah. So he did the work, but he didn't finish it. He didn't love it. He didn't throw his entire soul into it. So I'm like, okay, that's a B. He still did the work. He put the hours in. It just wasn't his jam. And so he didn't do it with the same level of gusto that he did for his A-level work, which is most of what he did. So there are ways to be able to kind of look at that and assess it. and do it in a way that's honest and fair and still be able to meet the benchmarks that the traditional world is asking of you, even if you're not learning in traditional ways. So another time grading makes sense is like my teenager, who I was saying before was frantically checking the Google Drive, like, where is my score? I want to know that I did well on this thing. And I mean, she'd go through the rubric and she'd know all the stuff. If you have a kid who loves that, then grading makes sense. Have fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We just did that right before our fall break. Again, we have an oversight teacher because we use the California public charter school system. And I don't enjoy grading things against a rubric. And I've also been really honest on the podcast about writing being one of our real struggle points. And he's come a huge way in writing. He had done an expository essay, a 5-paragraph expository essay, and the our oversight teacher read one of the drafts and she was like, oh, this is really great, blah, blah, blah. And he literally, when she was talking about it, we were at an in-person meeting and he made this little like heart symbol with his hands and he's like floating. He was like so excited and felt so good from her feedback on it. So I was like, when you finished it, would you like me to see about having her grade it against the rubric so you can get that feedback? And he was like, yeah, I would like that. So I sent it to her and she was happy to do that for us. And she came back and she was like, actually, I think that rubric doesn't even begin to cover what he did in his writing. So I created an 8th grade level rubric and I graded it against that. And here's the feedback. And it was like a perfect score in it. And I think he walked on air for days afterwards,
Yeah.
right? Like it was amazing feedback for him in that situation, in that scenario. And when it is a good, positive thing, grading does not, like you don't have to say, oh, we don't grade. I refuse to let them have grades. If it's good for them, this is about what works for your kids, what builds them up, what makes them excited to do things. Now, if it's driving perfectionism, if they're really struggling with this, trying to be perfect or not getting the best score all the time, maybe you want to back off on the grading or work on what that looks like. And there are definitely unit studies and programs out there to help you work on those things with your kiddo. If it becomes the focus instead of the learning process, then again, probably time to look at whether or not grading is what you really want to be doing and including in your homeschool, at least in that moment. And also, if it recreates the same stress that school was causing, if you were in a position where school wasn't working and you pulled your kid out to homeschool, don't recreate those same stress points. And if that's a red pen or even just whether or not they get a smiley face on their paper, you don't have to do those things. You can, if you need to, because you need it for record keeping or whatever else, have your kiddo look at it beforehand. And when they give it back, before you hole punch it and stick it in the binder, then you can put the smiley face on it. Your kiddo doesn't need to see that if it's not good for them and their mental health.
Yeah, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about it before earlier, but that thing, you can give grades, you can do tests, but you can also do alternate forms of assessment, narrative feedbacks, portfolios, especially for those artsy kids. They might want to put together a portfolio instead. But you can also just have conversations. The number of times that I've had these really deep, intriguing, important conversations with my kid that show me that they have a much better understanding of history than right now, I'd say like 75% of Americans. That matters. That counts. And you don't need to take a Post-it note and write an A on it and stick it on their shirt because they had a great conversation.
Yeah. And I will add to that, you do not have to have read the same book as your kid to have those conversations. Because I talk to people who are like, I can't keep up with the reading. And I'm like, you don't have to read the same. I have 3 kids. What am I supposed to be reading all the same books that they're reading? And plus my own reading? There's no way. you can just talk to them about it and ask them questions about it. I lead a book club every other Wednesday night, and all the kids show up having read different books. The only requirement for the book club is that you read a book that begins with a certain letter of the alphabet. And because it's almost the end of the year, we just did X, our next meeting is Y, and then we have Z. We're literally doing Z on December 31st. It's our final meeting of the year. And I haven't read the book, but I can still have conversation with the kids and be like, how'd that go? Or what do you think about that? Do you think that they made the right choice? Having not read the book, they've all read different books. I don't even know what they're reading until they show up. So we still have a great time. You don't have to read the book. So if all of this is giving you heart palpitations, listening to us talk about potentially not testing or not grading things and stuff like that, Amanda's brought it up a couple of times. I might have said it too. It's time to deschool, friend. It is time to deschool. So we've done episodes about deschooling. We have an entire online course that goes into deschooling very, very heavily. There's an entire module about deschooling. But oftentimes your instinct to test is leftover conditioning from the public school system, or traditional school system, I should say. And that deschooling period helps you reset expectations and break down everything you thought learning was or had to be, and think about what it could be and what you are capable of building if you break down all that old structure. So I know you're all probably tired of it. You're like, every time I turn around, they're telling me to deschool. There's a reason why.
Yeah. Yeah. So some really specific signs that you may need to just take a little step back. And again, deschooling is not like don't teach your kids anything. There's a lot that goes into deschooling. But some signs that you might need to go and do a little bit of reading up on that is if you panic when a day doesn't look quote unquote productive, if you feel compelled to validate your legitimacy to outsiders, if you aren't confident enough to just say, no, we've got it and they're learning tons of things, it's probably time to do some deschooling, because part of deschooling is figuring out what you want your homeschool to look like, figuring out how your child thrives. And when you have those things, it's much easier to stand firmly in the belief that you've made the right decision for your kid. So if you're not feeling super confident in that, it's time to do a little bit of deschooling. If you think learning only counts if it can be graded or tested, it's probably time to do some deschooling. Those things are not fundamentally bad, but they also don't need to be the cornerstone of homeschooling in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so when does testing actually make sense? If your curriculum comes with quizzes and tests, consider making them open book or just a review worksheet. It allows your child to review ideas and concepts. That's what we really want. We want them to take the stuff in. So if they're reviewing it, that's in a lot of ways is even better than testing whether or not they've memorized it. I've said it before and I will say it again. I think it is far more valuable to teach your child to look up a correct answer than it is to teach them to just guess. If the paramedic in the back of the ambulance doesn't know exactly how to calculate a specific medication dosage, I would much rather he quickly look it up than guess. If my accountant isn't positive how to handle something on my taxes, I'd really rather he look it up and make sure that he does it right than guess and get me audited. There are very few situations in life, there are very few career paths where it's like, no, you will not have time to look up the right answer. You've just got to make your best guess and go for it. Teach your kids to look things up, to be confident. It's one of the best life skills you can teach them, both now and for their career. Another situation where it might make sense is high schoolers who are prepping for SAT, ACT, or dual enrollment type classes. It can be a really big shock for kids who have never done any type of testing to suddenly have to sit down and take like a 4-hour test, or also B, if they've never done online testing, if they haven't spent much time online practicing and doing some trial runs with online things so that they're just used to the flow and having to stare at their computer screen for that long and knowing how to go back and forth and what features on their computer they can use during the test and what ones they can't. Just
Hmm.
helping your kids do that kind of stuff, that can be important and helpful. There was a great trend where schools were not requiring admissions tests, and
Hmm.
now we're seeing a lot of that come back. And so it's important to keep that in mind.
Can I just add, way back in season 1, we did an episode where we had on somebody who's been doing SAT prep and testing for like a million years. And one of the coolest things that I thought that came out of that episode was his specificity of the fact that a lot of people prepare for the SAT or the ACT by taking practice tests. They take practice tests, they take another practice test, they take another practice test. And he brought up at the time, like if Caitlin Clark is missing 3-pointers, she's not just going out there and randomly throwing 3 points. She's looking at like, well, at this point on the 3-point line from this angle. And that's where she's standing to practice. It's not just, I'm going to go out and practice and run all over and throw basketballs around. It's very specific. And so his point was, if you're missing one very specific skill on the verbal, you don't need to just be continuously taking practice tests. You need to drill into that skill on the verbal. So there's a skill and an art to preparing for these tests beyond just kind of like, well, I'll give it a whirl. So if you are panicked about the SAT/ACT, go listen to the episode. If you're approaching that time frame with your kids, go listen to that episode. It was really, I learned a whole bunch of stuff from that episode. I thought it was great. Yeah, it
And
was good.
and it's fun because he works a lot with traditional school kids. And so it's fun when we can kind of have, it's not really a crossover episode, but that, like the different perspectives. We definitely thrive with different perspectives here.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we're almost done. We'll have a mantra for you here in just a minute, but just a few kind of high level practical reassurances for you, the homeschool caregiver. You are not irresponsible for not testing, unless it's your state law, in which case you need to test. And yes, not testing is irresponsible. Okay. Like it is what it is. You know your kid better than anyone else, and you can assess them in the way that works for them. Daily learning is more reliable than standardized testing and standardized measurements.
Mm-hmm.
And your homeschool doesn't need to look like a public school. We're not recreating public school at home. That is not why we chose to homeschool.
No, public school is free and consistent and regular, and you could drop them off at 8 a.m. and be to the gym by 9 a.m., right? I mean, you have chosen a more intricate, involved path for a reason. If you wanted public school, it would be the easy button in a lot of ways, and you didn't choose that. So if there's a reason you didn't choose it, it's really great to define those reasons so that you don't replicate them at home. So yeah. Yeah. All right. It's mantra time, peeps. Here we go. Let's wrap this up. Your kid does not need to ace a test to prove they are learning. They are already showing you every day.
Yep.
Just be present. Acknowledge it when it happens. Write it down in your phone. Text somebody who's really tight in your circle and celebrate that moment to really bring awareness to it. I used to have a thing with my mom all the time where it was kind of like a chicken or the egg thing, because I used to joke that I had amazing parking karma. And my mom would say, do you really have good parking karma, or do you just celebrate so hard when you get a good parking space that you don't even notice the times that you don't? And so it's that thing. Celebrate so hard when they have those successes that it drowns out all of the worry and the doubt and the, am I screwing this up? So yeah, you've got this.
Yeah, that's it. It'll be great. You don't need grades or tests. They're showing you day in and day out, just like they're growing day in and day out. And some days, suddenly they need new shoes. It's the same with learning.
Exactly. All right, friends, until next time, happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.